Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks.
Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try to make your world a little weirder. I'm Niall.
And I'm Kyle, and I have an incredibly large IQ. And that IQ allows me to think, smart stuff, like really good thoughts that I can have.
Well, the thing that we can definitely know for sure is that anything you say is definitely true.
Right. You should kind of just take it at face value no matter what.
Because you're a member of Mensa,
right,
you should just be seen as better than other people.
Yeah, no, exactly. Now, let me get this out of the way up front. I genuinely don't want to dismiss Barney Hill. That's not the point I'm making.
That's not the point we're making.
But the point I'm really making is that you kind of have to have a really high IQ to understand alien abduction stories, but also I think Rick and Morty's one of the other things that I've read about as being very intelligent. I'm too busy doing a high IQ tests and things to actually engage with Rick and Morty.
You're too busy clicking on that sidebar ad on your web browser that says IQ test free.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's for some reason also that leads to your bank account being drained, and no one's really understanding why.
I am
so smart.
Consistently in debt. It's become a problem. So this is very interesting. We watched a documentary. I feel like I can't remember what the last documentary we watched was. It's been a little while.
I think the last has there been one since Jules and I did one?
Maybe not. It might not have been since Call Me Miss Cleo, which I wasn't even present for. I did listen to, and you guys did a great job. But it was. Look, you brought the sex appeal. It was lacking my typical dry wit.
That a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, certain. Yeah. Which again, if you have a high IQ, you understand what I mean by dry wit. Anyways, I'm going to stop doing that joke.
For how smart you are, you forgot the main point. This is a fuck your documentary.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
We're back with business about fuck your documentary.
Fucking your documentary.
Now this episode can't be monetized on YouTube because I said fuck in the first 3 minutes.
I think that time has passed. I think we're making crazy money on YouTube because we say fuck in the first 30 seconds. Like basically every episode at this point.
Yeah.
But sorry, I should have yes-anded you there, but I had to know but YouTube you.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, people forget the second rule of comedy, which is no but. So
that's right.
It's why Hank Hill's so fucking funny. Now, today, Kyle, we watched...
Yeah. Sorry. I have to move on from the Hank Hill thing, but like... I really liked it.
We could totally, we could go deep down the Hank Hill rabbit hole if we wanted to, which is what they call his butthole.
Right.
But I don't think that's really where we want to go today, because today we watched Shock Docs.
Yeah.
Part of a new series. Well, not a new series.
Newish.
I looked into this a little bit because I was curious what this heading was about.
Yeah.
But we watched Alien Abduction: Betty and Barney Hill. So this was a documentary from Max said 2023, but that
it's 2022.
2022. Okay.
But maybe I don't. Okay. So it's on HBO Max, right? But it also has an air date.
It's on Max.
Oh, right.
Buddy.
Fucking whatever. Whatever. People know what I mean.
Drop the HBO. It's cleaner.
HBO. I don't agree because Max sounds like I don't know what Max is. HBO Max, I understand exactly what I'm getting.
Yeah,
but Max is a little confusing.
It's the joke. They dropped the thing that wasn't the recognizable. They dropped the
Right.
recognizable brand off of the name, which is unhinged.
Not great, but so it has like an air date, which makes me think that maybe so its air date is in February of 2022, but its like release date on Max is 2023. So it makes me think that maybe this aired somewhere prior to going to streaming on Max, because like
Kyle, Baby Birds, I got this information for you.
Okay, cool.
I can tell you what happened here.
Yeah,
because I was curious about this. Can I just say,
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm very glad that you got this information, because I went the complete other way and I was like, I should go back and read about Betty and Barney Hill, because this is insufficient to me.
I'll say this documentary has a very specific goal that I think it accomplishes, but it's not an all-encompassing documentary.
Yeah.
So what this is, Shock Docs is a series of 2-hour TV time. Like, so that's why they're almost 90 minutes, because commercials.
Yeah.
2-hour block, Travel Channel produced documentaries about great American haunting scares, whatever. They called it like American horror stories kind of thing. Like,
sure.
They were kind of lumping into that. So literally the first episode was about Ed and Lorraine Warren. This isn't like a TV show, really. It's like a series of documentaries that they made. And it's they're Travel Channel things. Like that is why they're formatted the way they are. And then they have, instead of just putting them up under the Shock Doc fucking banner as a series, they just uploaded them all, like a bunch of them individually for some reason, and as separate movies. I don't know if that's like when we were, so a little bit of behind the curtain shit here.
Sure.
Whenever we talk about these FYD episodes, a thing we've been coming across lately is how documentaries have been shifting into these mini-series, these limited series, docu-series. That is the current trend in documentaries, because with streaming, you want binge watches, you want people to spend more time on your platform. So they take what would be a 2-hour documentary and spread it over 6 episodes of a limited series. Because they can like add recaps and shit for each episode, and it just lengthens it. And it makes FYD a little harder, because we end up having to either go for more like niche produced documentary content, or we have to find a way to split up a docu-series into episodes or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, is like, I think so again, a little bit behind the curtain here, but the first thing that I was like kind of wanting to watch was the Love Is One cult documentary, because I've been following for a little while now one of the people who I think that ultimately what she did was help with, because she like does this person that I follow on YouTube does a lot of research into various phenomena, UFOs, things, but is like also very into cults, which like, notoriously here we don't always get too close into the cult stuff, but I think the Love Is One is pretty interesting and worth watching. But it was like, it was like split up, and there are other technical reasons where we're like, maybe we'll save that for another time. But one of the people who works on it is like a really great researcher. And so I was like, well, if that's the kind of like quality that's being brought to it, I think I want to see it.
I forget, was that a series or was that a
that's a series. It's like, I think hour-long mini series. It's like 3 episodes or something. So it's like 3 hours long. But anyways, I'm glad that we ended up doing this for a couple reasons. One, it's more bite-sized. It's like easier to swallow than 3 hours about a cult that results in the death of its own leader, which, spoilers, if you don't know about Love Is One, that is what happened to Mother God is her name.
Yeah.
Whole thing, it's a wild story. But we decided to look into Betty and Barney Hill, this Shock Docs coverage of it. And while I was watching this, I was like, man, okay, so this is what happened to these kinds of shows. They ended up streaming on Max. Because this is the contemporary version of a show that I would constantly watch in the early 2000s, whatever, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on the names of these kinds of shows.
Like Unexplained Mysteries.
That
kind of weird,
crazy story with like reenactments and interspersed with like interviews with people related to the story and archival footage and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's what this is. And as far as one of those kinds of shows go, what am I trying to say here? Sorry, you go ahead. What were you thinking?
I get like I think we're coming at this in a similar. I'm literally, we don't talk about these ahead of time.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it seems like you're coming at this about the same way I am, where it's like I get that like I said earlier, that this is a show that seems to have a specific goal. And I think that it accomplishes that goal pretty well. And what that goal is to give you a very boiled down essentials look at a case that is famous. This is the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. It uses archival footage, new interviews, old interviews, reenactments, and talking heads to give you a very bite-sized, contained version of the kind of, quote, canonical take on that story. It's not concerned with either fully proving or debunking. It is just concerned with giving you the
broad overview, the story that everybody knows. If you don't already know the story, this is the basics of what happened, basically. And I say the basics because the details of Betty and Barney are much deeper than what this documentary presents, but they do, they bring up some stuff that's maybe not as often talked about.
They bring up stuff that is like specifically part of like one take on it. Like the take of this one seems to be basically the book based off of one of the books that they were involved in like that was written by some psychiatrists and stuff. Like it seems to be one kind of full take,
Yes, it definitely is. And it's, it is, as far as those kinds of shows go, pretty good.
I'd agree.
I guess, but like pretty good with a caveat for me. Betty and Barney Hill it's one of those stories where like it is a little difficult to come to any one conclusion about what happened. But there are some things that go with this case that I think should be more often brought up. And one of the things that I did in watching this is I also went and kind of did a little. I'd had some Betty and Barney Hill articles that were written by a couple people that I really like. That I'd been kind of like setting aside, like maybe I'll revisit Betty and Barney Hill soon, because like that was, I think, another episode that we covered really early on in the show. So there's like 0% chance we did it justice, right? So it's like that's probably worth revisiting. So to be completely upfront here, I've been thinking about revisiting that story and getting as many details as I could on it. So I had these articles setting aside. I'm not going to get super deep into the articles here, but I would like to say a really, really good set of expanded material on Betty and Barney Hill that gets you deeper into the story. There is a Substack called Getting Spooked, written by Tanner Boyle. And Tanner Boyle, first of all, I have to say, Tanner Boyle I brought up because I've previously mentioned Tanner Boyle because they wrote extensively on Gulf Breeze. They're a really great writer of ufology and all stuff like that. And so I got a lot of information by reading their stuff on this. And the other one I want to make mention of is they go by Boltzmann Booty, which I'm assuming that's a reference to something, but they have an article that's just in part 1 that came out last year called The Hill Abduction as Counterinsurgency.
Okay.
So I read all of that after watching this documentary, and there's a lot there's just a lot more that you could dig into with the Hill abduction beyond what is presented in this documentary. So
yeah, this is a very there's not really a skeptic's take in this documentary. Like, there's not someone who is looking at it in the full context of history and outside factors.
Yeah.
This is a very what do Betty and Barney Hill say happened? What did the like hypnotic regression stuff reveal? And then what did her niece, specifically named Kathleen, find out in the decades since? Is kind of those are the main points of view covered in this documentary. So it's interesting to look at it from like an outside perspective, and definitely worth going back to for another episode in the near future to kind of like lay out the not true really, because who knows, but the full, more wide web of this whole story. Because it is like one of the big UFO abduction cases in history. Like, it is. It's one of those.
Yeah. And it's like, if you want to get, like, it's been analyzed so much over the decades that there's been a lot of developing, a lot of new ideas are trying to be pitched around this this particular story. I find it funny that the sort of like suggestive of aliens version in this documentary, it kind of suggests it sort of like so many of these documentaries do that. Okay, let me put it this way. People in the documentary straight up look in the camera and say aliens are real and they're here, which is a classic line. They commit a lot of UFO documentary type TV sins that drive me nuts. But
the amount of like half-shadowed faces of gray aliens turning slowly to or from camera used as like transitional images in this is absurd.
Yeah,
like, if you watch this documentary and take a shot every time an alien face appears on screen, you might go to the hospital.
That could be a fun game though.
I legitimately, someone before you do this, quickly go through and see how many there are, and like if it starts to be too much, stop it midstream. Don't hurt yourself for this.
I condone getting alcohol poisoning for the UFO documentary, whereas Niall does not, and that's where we kind of differ. And I'm just remember
that's
who has
the
the
fair
big
and
IQ.
even-handed coverage you get on this podcast.
Yeah. I gotta take the counterpoint here. No, I love that all this alien, because like they taught. This is going to be a thing forever now, by the way, where the documentary ties the UFO phenomenon and the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill to the 2017 explosion of interest in UFOs because, apparently the military saw, got on camera UFOs and what's his name from Blink-182 leaked it. And
the Tic Tac footage is what they call it.
Yeah. And what's so great is they have like, I have it paused on this screen right now. They have a guy here who's talking about that kind of shit. And his name is Ben Hansen. And his title is UFO researcher / former federal agent, which is great.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Ex-Fed.
That's the kind of they got a Fed talking about UFOs in this documentary, which is
great.
And
he's very certain aliens are real.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
That's
it's really fun whenever the Feds show up in these things. I'm always excited, and like there's they even bring up the relationship of Betty Hill to like learning about Donald Kehoe, who is like ex-Marine Corps guy, but is like also a big. He was like the big advocate of like U.S. government involvement in UFO stuff. Like that's a big part of his thing. She's I think specifically read the Flying Saucer Conspiracy,
yes,
which is like I think one of the core texts that's like the government is covering up the existence of UFOs, right? Like those are just the kinds of people that we're interacting with here. And another really fun thing too is like I really hope that the rest of this article comes out soon-ish. But that Hill abduction is counterinsurgency article, they point out how there is some, and we should talk about this a little bit, but like the Hills. Okay, we got to start with this. Actually, let me back up.
Yeah.
For the people who don't know the story of Betty and Barney Hill, basically it's 1961, and Betty and Barney Hill are driving home when they see a glowing object in the sky. They watch it. They sort of feel like it's following them. And this happens over the course of, I think, a couple hours where they're just watching this thing follow them.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, Barney Hill looks at it through binoculars and sees this sort of disc-shaped UFO. And like, I think later they would uncover in hypnotic regression sessions that he could like see things like people or beings inside this craft in these like portholes.
Yeah, there were like windows on the side of this thing.
Yeah. And so they're kind of like freaking out. They're trying to lose it, and they like lose their memory. This is another early case of sort of a lost time. They forget what happened to them at a certain point. And then later on, they would like see psychologists. They would undergo hypnotic regression. Those sessions would tease out the stories about, aliens and abduction. That would become this would become sort of like the core narrative of UFO abduction moving forward. In the sort of mythology of UFOs.
In a lot of ways, this is the archetypical abduction.
Yeah, this is so one of the things that I think is extremely important that is not totally touched on. I guess it's like if you're just trying to tell the story of what happened and not necessarily try and get too deep into the context, I guess that's fine. But I think context matters for these UFO stories throughout the 50s and 60s. But prior to the Betty and Barney Hill abduction, interactions with UFOs and aliens were like you think of the abductees, right? Where they like. So one of the things that Tanner Boyle points out in his articles is like the abductees were kind of like, they almost felt like they were sort of groping for the limelight in a lot of cases. They were like closely interacting with aliens that were like human-like and coming to, save humanity and the Space Brothers and all that bullshit. But Betty and Barney Hill can be kind of the demarcation between that type of experience and then the UFO abduction experience of being like brought up onto a ship and being examined and tested and having samples taken. That begins here. The change, there is a shift that is like pronounced here with this case when it becomes a big deal, when it sort of gets famous, right? And I think that's important.
They overblow it a little bit by saying it's the first American abduction and the first time where people had missing time, and they give it another first that's kind of like dubious, but you see it repeated enough that it's like I get it, but it's like it's not technically true, but sure,
Yeah, it's sort of like with things like this, it just makes me think. I want to see how this documentary began from like research and development and into like filming and interviewing. I would love to be a fly on a wall for this documentary because it sort of feels to me like, somebody was like, this is a famous UFO case. Here are the people that we can interview about it. Here's the archival footage. Here's the book. Go. Like, I don't feel like this, a lot of the times these feel like, how when you're watching the X-Files, as we do on our bonus show on patreon.com/it gets weird TV, where we discuss the X-Files right now. How like you can kind of feel that people involved with the show cared about the history of like UFOs or whatever that they were pulling from.
Yeah.
When I watch something like this, I kind of feel like people behind the scenes don't care that much. I could be wrong, I guess. No,
I think you have, okay. So I think that this show is not made for enthusiasts. It's not made by enthusiasts for enthusiasts, by researchers for whatever. It is made to be a UFO documentary for the Travel Channel.
Are we in too deep, Niall? Is that the problem? Is that the actual problem?
I think, Kyle, you just got to sit back, pop some fucking popcorn, and just vibe with the shock docs.
You're probably right.
Because I'm not saying that you're wrong here. Like I think there should be more higher production, in-depth documentaries that actually are trying to tell an encompassing story about these cases. But that doesn't. But I think you're right that is not the intention of this whatsoever. This is made to be entertainment.
Yeah, you're right. As I was saying it, I realized it kind of occurred to me that's. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. But what I will say about this, despite my sort of misgivings about how like sort of shallow some of it is, they have really, this is like some of the best compilation of the archival footage and interviews and such of the stuff surrounding this case.
Yeah.
That alone, that's kind of great, I think.
I really like, I'm not to like jump to the end of the episode or anything, but I think these my whole pitch for watching this for this episode was, okay, it seems like there's a bunch of these that are trying to cover a lot of famous kind of weird cases. Are they any good? Is this like a baseline thing that is like produced at the level of Ancient Aliens, but with like a little bit better content? And so like my hope was that this could be a series we come back to and check out some other ones and see how it can be a jumping off point. And I think that it functions as that. Like I think that this is like a series that is worth looking at, and it has some merit. You know?
I agree 100%. I mean, like, this is like, if I had seen this back when I was 16, this would have been it would have been super sick. Like, but I'm so far removed from being 16 years old and going like, oh my God, they recovered a ship in Roswell, to now I'm just an obsessive and know a little too much about these stories. I don't mean that in like a self-important kind of way or congratulatory way. It's just like, I know a little too much, so like I roll automatically at certain things that I think most people who aren't fucking weirdos would probably be totally fine with.
And it seems like they tried to, at the end of the episode or at the end of the movie, whatever you want to call it, they tried to bring it up to modern day and like land it like if I had an actual complaint about this documentary, it's the last like 10 minutes because the stuff with their niece is interesting. I think it's interesting to see a family member trying to do the research and everything, but they tried to make it seem like there had been startling revelations about Betty and Barney Hill in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And it just, there weren't.
Not exactly. What I will tell you though is reading those articles I mentioned up front by Boyle and Boltzmann Booty, the things that are sort of being teased out now, the main thing that Boyle focuses on that I think the documentary also sort of like glances upon but doesn't get too deep into, really big one, that again, I think Boyle does such an excellent job talking about. It's like from his like college paper he wrote. I still think it's good. The racial anxiety angle of this, which the thing that we did actually, I think I didn't even like mention up front, because it's like, it's just, you hear Betty and Barney Hill and this is the interracial marriage abduction case. They're an interracial couple back when all kinds of fucked up shit was going on. So like anti-miscegenation.
During the civil rights movement.
Yeah, civil rights movement, anti-miscegenation laws were still kind of active, I think, in certain places. And like it was still the racial tension is still very much oppressively present.
Yeah. You want to know what really stuck out to me about that in the documentary? There was one line that really stuck out to me that made my like fucking post Richard Doty brain like light up.
Yeah.
Which was a line that just said something along the lines of, after publishing the book that they published, he left his position with a civil rights organization to go on a book tour, effectively.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay,
if you like that, okay. So,
yeah,
here's the thing. Like, very important thing about Betty and Barney Hill is that they were pretty fucking left-leaning progressive people. You know,
you can tell.
Betty grows up with a union family. She like was a teenager going to oh God, what's the word? Why can't I think of the word? But not protest. Well, I think she
Rallies.
did attend protests, but she also would attend strikes and things like that.
Gotcha.
Is the word I was looking for. And then of course, you know, Barney Hill is of course having to grow up with the racial strife of you know, white people being shitty. And that is an angle that, when examined, is really, really interesting and I think worth considering with this story. It is a thing that like gets mentioned, how like Barney is a member of the NAACP. They kind of touch on Betty's activism as well. And they both were that to like their entire lives. Even in like this sort of like liberal, but like still like, again, oppressively white New Hampshire that they were, which is where they were living in the 60s. So it's a really, I think, important, but like it just kind of glassed over aspect in this in this documentary. And one of the things that like you can pick up on if you just like listen to Betty and Barney talk, one of the things that they do is they play audio of their hypnotic regression sessions. And first of all, gotta say, because I'd heard I'd heard some of this audio before. It's online. Pretty eerie to listen to. Barney, the thing that's notable is that Barney's descriptions and regression are way more emotionally distressing and anxiety-ridden than Betty's. And this is, again, something pointed out by Boyle in their articles. It's like Barney has this like, I'm trying to remember. He describes the people in the ship, for instance, the beings in the ship when he sees them. And like, I think in one description, he describes a Nazi-like German officer as one of the beings, which is, again, not a thing in the documentary. But he describes...
They mention the aliens being in military uniforms.
Right.
But they don't, like, tie that together fully, that he basically had, like, a Nazi flashback.
Well, okay, so
you know?
he sees... So, again, he's a World War II, like, vet also. And he sees a German Nazi in the ship, like a being that he believes is a German Nazi. And then also another thing that I don't think it's mentioned in the documentary at all is Barney describes a red-headed Irishman, and he like remarks that the Irish are hostile to black people.
Yeah, that definitely isn't in the documentary.
But then Betty, if you listen to her stuff, she gets emotionally distressed at times, but it's like Tanner Boyle points out how like her description of interaction with the aliens is way more akin to the extremely white abductee experience of like, oh, they wanted to ask us and about, you know, who we like. It's very racially charged.
She sees a star map.
More
like,
of a
she
Space
gets shown
Brothers
a star map that,
yeah.
that like shows where they're from and stuff. And like the most emotional she gets is when they insert a needle into her like belly button to like take a sample out of her abdomen.
Yeah.
And she, they say it's not going to hurt, and it does, and that freaks her out. But the rest of her recounting is much more, like you said, calm and collected, and she has a nicer time. Like, Barney gets rectally probed. They take a semen sample. They take skin samples.
It's terrifying.
He's terrified the entire time. And she's like shown around the ship, and they check if she's pregnant. But she doesn't feel particularly like threatened or anything. And it is. They don't say it as such, but you're 100% right. And the Tanner Boyle stuff is on point about how like racially charged it is.
I have to send you these articles because you'll really like them. They're very good. And it's like Boyle even like brings up the development of the sort of like weird racial undertones of abductees and the Nordic whites, and how that sort of develops out from theosophy, and how theosophy had this sort of weird underpinning of like racial theory and stuff. It's so good. So yeah, it's like their experiences are very different. And I think that the racial anxiety that underpins this entire case is like vital to understanding it. But it's just kind of like, oh, they're leftists. They don't say that. They're like, oh, they're progressives who, he's a member of the NAACP. She protests. They're great. They do a great job. But that leads to the other like really wild, stuff from Boltzmann Booty, which is like, I wish the part 2 existed. I want to read more on this, but the short version, and I think I would like to revisit this story, so I won't get too deep into it here. Yeah. But
gotta leave him wanting more, Kyle.
You're right.
Tease him.
You're right. So the short version is essentially that there is some evidence that is, some of which is a little tenuous, but it does ultimately sort of make some sense, that Betty and Barney Hill were like actual avowed communists. And like not communist as in it's the 50s and 60s and, we'll label you a communist.
Not in the like McCarthyism, everyone who I don't like is a communist way.
Yeah, the details of this evidence, it's like not a 100% thing, but it does suggest that maybe they were communists. There's some stuff on that, but one of the things that is pretty well established, as far as I understood it, is that Betty and Barney Hill made friends with Air Force intelligence. And this they kind of mention in the documentary too. And this is like another thing where like, are you post Doty or pre Doty? Well, if you're post Doty, that starts to sound really fucking weird, right? That throws up a red flag. So, I want to sort of like dig into this idea in an actual episode focused on their story and not this documentary, but that is an interesting angle that I had not seen before. And I think there could be something interesting to discuss there. But the documentary doesn't, look, they got a Fed like as a talking head. They're not going to talk about how, maybe we fucking mind control and drug experimented the Betty and Barney Hill abductees. Like maybe, they're probably not going to talk about that.
The quote first ever alien abduction was Feds attacking communists. Yeah. They're not going to say that in that documentary.
Yeah. But I just wanted to bring that up because it's very interesting. And the other thing that I was reminded of by reading these articles, because they talk about like the Betty and Barney Hill abduction with regards to like how the media would go on to portray it over the decades. Do you remember our episode of It Gets Weird TV where we watched Project Blue Book and they do a Betty and Barney Hill thing?
Yeah, they turn into like a fucking like bottle episode where it's like
weird.
A hostage situation.
It's so fucking okay. Check this out. That episode not only deletes the interracial aspect of it, because in it, Betty is no longer a white woman. They are a black couple. And Barney is like a PTSD addled like guy who is like threatening he like brings a gun into a police station and is like threatening people if they don't listen to his story about UFO abduction. And it just totally fucks up the Betty and Barney Hill story. But it's like, it's so bizarre in retrospect, especially after reading this thing about how vital the racial aspect is.
Yeah, that episode always was really like, it's a fun episode if you don't know anything about Betty and Barney Hill, but the more you know about it, the more that episode is just like it so completely misses the point.
Yeah.
That you have to just think of it as a separate thing.
Yeah, it's weird. But I guess let me also mention, because I said it and dude, I'm sorry. I'm like full unmedicated ADD mode right now. It does a thing that I hate every time in this documentary.
The documentary?
Yes.
Okay.
The IQ thing and the thing we already made fun of. It does the cardinal sin of like, well, these people had high IQ. They had a good standing in the community. It completely flattens any sort of like, it completely flattens any sort of like nuance to who they were as people to make you go, oh, well, they're believable. And they even have like a family member, Kathleen, what's her name? Kathleen Marden.
Yeah.
Who is related. I think that she is the niece. Yeah. And she like, even she like goes out of her way to say like, oh yeah, Barney had a high IQ. And so,
but wasn't the Mensa person that they mentioned, it was the person that figured out the Zeta Reticuli thing, the teacher?
Oh yeah. That also, well, they bring up IQ like twice.
Okay.
Which again is like such a bullshit thing. But yeah, they later like there's the lady who uses like star maps based on Betty's accounts to determine where these visitors came from, these alien visitors, and determines, like you said, they're Zeta Reticulans. And they go out of the way of the documentary to be like, you can trust her because she was a Mensa member and had a high IQ. And also Barney had a high IQ and blah, blah, blah.
So
which,
Is this the origin of the Zeta Reticuli thing? Do you know?
That's a good question. I don't actually know that. I sort of, honestly, since this is the inception basically of the Greys as the abduction aliens, it would not surprise me if the association, at least of them being from the Zeta Reticulan system, is from this story. But I don't actually know that for sure.
Yeah, because like that whole thing was found out like it was a couple years later, so we were probably close to 1970. I can't think of Zeta Reticulan stuff before then, but I don't know everything, of course.
Yeah.
So I was just curious, like that hit me. It's like, is that the origin of it?
It very well might be.
Yeah,
but I couldn't say for sure. I'd have to go.
That's
Google
some of the stuff that
bit.
to me is the hardest to track down in these things.
The first person to do that idea.
Where did this specific idea come from? Which is why when I find something that seems canonical, it's always really cool. But it's always like, because so much of this stuff is like, people self-published zines that would like put out their information and self-published papers and shit. A lot of this stuff is not digitized.
Yeah.
And hard to come across the actual like record.
Like you all, the thing that makes these things complicated too is like one of the many things. It's like you would have to create a timeline of like, here are canonical events that are like marked in history by publication date of a book or an article or a report or whatever, or a declassified document. But then you'd also have to factor in a semi-alternate timeline of like people who will do things like self-publishing a zine or going on the early internet and like becoming entrenched in the phenomenon, who then tell you like, actually this date is when the first thing actually happened. Like they basically publish alternate histories that like can't be confirmed, but nonetheless become, wrapped up in the whole story.
Yeah.
It's a huge problem with UFOs that when people are doing that all the time, and it can frustrate researching sometimes. But yeah, this just takes us back to the whole, we need to create a big ass database of information here to reference.
It's never gonna happen, but I wish there was money and effort put into making a timeline.
Yeah.
and web,
Yeah, definitely. Well, also, sorry, I just remembered, but this is another thing that gets brought up a little bit in the documentary, is like, they're also one of the earliest accounts that I'm aware of people being like, we don't really want the limelight. Yeah. Or at least for Barney, it seems that way, which makes it weird that he ends up going on that game show about where he's like the main focus.
The fucking game show that they use in Catch Me If You Can.
Yeah.
As like the framing device, where it's you and then like two other people, and everyone says, "Oh, I'm Barney Hill, and I was abducted by aliens," and they have to guess who's the real one.
Yeah, it's great. It's wild that they've got some footage of that in here too. So, but yeah, it's like they get mentioned as like not really wanting to take part in the alien thing, and it's, that's another classic of ufology, of like, well, these people didn't like the limelight, so that sort of suggests that they're telling the truth.
And they were thrust into it by this reporter that published a 5-part series on them in the newspaper without their input.
Yeah, it's
which is like, and you find out that the source for that was one of Betty's like friends, and so you just go like, anyone. We're gonna have to canonize the phrase post Doty, because like this is another thing that my brain just started throwing up fucking warning signs about, where it was like, okay, so her friend gave out the entire story. And that just like happened to be the thing that makes them go public and start doing this book tour and everything. It's like, to be a fly on the wall of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, I don't know. I think that one of the things that I would love to see in the creation of media about stories like this, you can go ahead and tell us, hey, they denied the limelight or whatever. They had this, trademark thing that we use to suggest that they're more trustworthy or their account is more valuable than another person's account. I kind of wish that you wouldn't like tell us how trustworthy they are. It's like, you can make that comment, but don't tell me that means I should just like trust the account implicitly because of that. It's just annoying. I don't know. But
yeah, they like, I get presenting someone's like why you should listen to them. I get saying this person is an expert on this. This person has spent 30 years in the field of X.
But they don't do that. They tell you it's their fucking IQ.
That's the thing. Yeah, like that's the thing. Because we're dealing with the world of weird, where there's no accreditation that actually means a goddamn thing. They try to come up with these other things that make that like, oh, they hold a position, like they're well liked in their town. People see them as trustworthy. They're very smart and have an IQ of 100 and whatever the fuck. And it just ends up sounding like they don't like. It makes me less likely to pay attention to them. Yeah. It's become such a trope to the point of being like annoying. Even if it's true, like I think at least in this case, it is true that they were like, but it again, think how flattening it is. Like you have to imagine that they weren't like living a perfect, happy, no problems whatsoever life in this community because they were just beloved by everybody. They were an interracial couple in 1961. There was guaranteed, like I said, anxiety surrounding that.
And so it's like, to just say like, they were well liked by the community is like, you're not actually telling the story that sort of matters here. Is I think the problem that I'm sort of, it's a problem that these stories tend to do that. I don't like that. And like, I don't know. Are they afraid to try and get into that part of the, like, oh, we don't want to talk about racism on our UFO documentary? Fucking spoiler alert, dude. But ufology, the history of UFOs is like, so much of it is racism and just awful stuff. So like, I don't know. It just seems important to not gloss over that.
I mean,
I guess
they're trying, like I said, with the kind of focus of what this show seems to be. They're trying not to give you the big bummers.
Yeah.
Like they'll talk about how, Betty and Barney were involved in the civil rights movement or whatever, because that's a nice thing. Because, yay, we won. We have civil rights now and everything's great. But they won't like actually reckon with the reality of the systemic problems of the country, because this is not a documentary about racism. It's a show trying to tell you the fun story of this UFO encounter.
Yeah.
And it sidesteps a lot of the tougher things that you have to look at when looking at a case like this.
Yeah.
So
and like, I think you have to, like, I don't know, just like think about like, okay, Barney. So Barney dies really young from a cerebral hemorrhage. And it makes you think, well, maybe he was under some fucking serious stress. And if this man's life is important to the story, so is, I think, the fact that he died young. Like
they both died in like the early 2000s, right?
He died in let me look it up. He died in 1969 at 46
so he died, like,
years
super
old.
early.
And she lived until 2004, never remarried. She was 85.
I was seeing her sister, because it was like her sister is buried nearby, and the headstone was kind of moss covered and hard to read.
Yeah.
It is weird they don't give like the actual they don't say when these people died in the documentary. Like they show a headstone, but they never utter the dates of either or how either of these people died.
Well, because again, I think that there is some question of like, why did Barney die so young? And they could do some really, really like, callous bullshit and be like, well, maybe, his terrifying abduction experience contributed to his early death. But like, then I think that even further highlights how weird it is that Betty and Barney's experiences in the abduction are so different.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe it just makes me think like maybe they don't want to reckon with any of that stuff, and they just want to, you said, they just want to tell the broad story.
The conclusion that I think we can definitely grasp out of that is that the alien jerk-off machine shortens your lifespan by a good deal to be used on a human.
You're going to have the best prostate orgasm of your life, but you're going to lose at least a decade of your life in using it.
Look, this is crass, and I apologize, but they do mention them right next to each other, that there was a rectal exam and a semen sample. They never say that they weren't done at the same time. And this guy just didn't fully understand what the prostate play is about, Like, this is 1961. They're not like super into the male G spot,
No, it's not quite as This is maybe that's it. They just didn't want the secret knowledge out about prostate orgasms.
Look, the aliens know how to like fucking attack your root chakra, so it's That's really the thing you should take away from this documentary.
Yeah, exactly. God. So I'm trying to think what else I wanted to say about this documentary, because like,
all right, let me look at my notes.
It's not bad. It's like a mixed bag for me, like I have like all these complaints as a UFO diehard now. But if somebody were to fucking pop some popcorn, like you said, and sit down with this on the TV and half pay attention, it's pretty good at doing what it wants to do, I guess.
Yeah, it is okay. I guess what I would say is this is a well-produced, slick, modern documentary series that gives you the highlights of all your favorite YouTube. This is the 20th century masters of releases here. This is like, you're not going to learn a lot of new information in here, but it'll be told in a pretty cohesive manner, and you'll get good archival footage and stuff. So there is stuff to be offered by watching these documentaries, and I enjoyed watching this one, even though it leaves out a lot of stuff. It gives you, like, sometimes when I just read a lot of stuff for these episodes and everything, it doesn't imprint as heavily in my brain. But then when you watch a show where there's visual aids and, a narrative, more like focus on creating a narrative, it sticks in your brain better. So I guess, like, I look at this as a way to, like, force my brain to remember more of the basic details of these big UFO stories and other types of stories. I'm curious to see how they handle, like, paranormal shit in this series.
Yeah.
But, like, it's not going to like give you a brand new perspective or unearth some shattering revelation,
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I feel like there is a pattern in trying to do documentaries, to watch documentaries about this stuff, of, like, when you're in stuff that was actually produced for TV or a movie, it's harder to run across stuff that's going to be, fresh and full of information that you don't already know. But I did enjoy watching it. I enjoyed, for all the reasons that I've mentioned, with all the footage that they have and the voice clips that they have. All the archival stuff is really genuinely cool. And I personally hadn't seen it before. Maybe there's another documentary or something on Betty and Barney Hill that had used this stuff, but this is my first time seeing it. So, or at least a lot of it. So it's definitely cool to see that. I instinctively, whenever I see a Fed talk about this stuff, I am also like, oh, fuck me, here we go.
But Kyle, he's an ex-Fed.
Right. Yeah, he's a UFO researcher now, whatever that is. Yeah, it's
yeah. What does that 9 to 5 look like?
I mean, frankly, I feel like I want to believe that it's what we do, essentially. Is just read these stories and compile notes on them. But it's probably like, oh, I got a call from the Air Force Office of Special Intelligence, which I actually don't know if that exists anymore. I don't think it does. Yeah, I just got a phone call from those guys, and they said I should go to this seminar and tell everybody that UFOs are real. Aliens are coming, baby. Also, here's another side note. It's good that I think that we ended up watching this one. I remember that during the pandemic, during the height of the pandemic, there was like a time when Betty and Barney Hill's story was like circulating again. Like, I saw people posting about it. I didn't know why. Now I know why, after going back and looking at the articles I mentioned. Apparently the Obamas were talking in 2022, not the Obamas themselves, but their production company that they own was going to produce a Netflix movie about Betty and Barney Hill, which is great because I don't know if you heard people talk about Leave the World Behind, which was produced by them. The movie.
I think I've heard it. I think I heard a tiny bit about it.
Oh my God. Everything I heard about it. Maybe we should watch that for Patreon sometime. That might be really funny. Everything I heard about it sounded like absolute fucking ass. And so I don't know. I guess that they were maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not happening now, but it seemed that the Obama's production company was looking to maybe produce something on Betty and Barney Hill. So in the last 2 years, it's a story that has cropped up again. And, you know, I would like to see a reexamination from people who genuinely care about getting, you know, as much of the truth as they can, a la Boyle and Boltzmann Booty. But I don't think that's the kind of information that will ever make it to a documentary, especially not one produced for the Travel Channel or Netflix. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
You would definitely need something else to get that going.
So Niall, I guess that would kind of bring us, you know, I'm sure we could, there's more we could talk about, I'm sure. Did you have anything else that you want to say about this particular documentary?
Yeah, let's see. Do I have any final thoughts?
Because I would like to get back into Betty and Barney Hill and revisit that case soon. And yeah, but go ahead.
There's one other thing. I was like, so I was trying to think about other documentaries we've watched, and I was like, what did this not do that other things have done that have pissed me off?
Yeah.
And the thing that I thought of was like, it didn't have any of that thing where they just like present some idea or other thing that is like that should be an entire tangent and section, and then they just gloss over it and move on.
Yeah.
But they kind of did in this documentary. That they did this thing that I think was in part trying to say that, you know, a lot of the reason why their accounts differed so much was because, you know, Barney had an emotional factor and stuff playing in because of the stress he's under as an interracial couple black man in the 1960s.
Yeah.
But they said that the psychiatrist said that Barney was absorbing Betty's dreams, and there was this like transference between the two of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Where the reason that like it came back up, like they were trying to forget it, but because of Betty's dreams, it like wouldn't let them go, basically. And I just want like a whole documentary by that psychiatrist explaining what the fuck.
Yeah,
that
that's
means.
That's pretty strange. That's maybe something that we should look into, because yeah, they don't really comment on that. There's nothing to kind of embellish on that idea, and I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, it like
that is weird.
It's one of the few places in my notes that I just wrote down a thing in full quotes and just a question mark next to it, because I truly did not like. I get your partner is anxious and that makes you anxious. Like, I understand that as an emotional transference, but I don't know how someone having a nightmare in the bed next to me makes me have a nightmare, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that is weird. Psychic transference, huh?
Yeah. So that's like, if we're going to go out on a note of like, if anyone else watches this and has a more complete take on what the fuck that meant,
sure
it's on Max.
I'm sure we can find stuff online too if we look into that guy and see what the hell he was talking about there. Because again, this is a very, very researched and poured over case. But it is one of those things where like sometimes when I'm listening to this stuff about UFOs or whatever, sometimes it's like, did these people just go, well, we're talking about UFOs and alien visitation and stuff, we might as well throw in something else that is batshit.
Yeah.
Is like how it feels.
You know what it really sounds like in that vein is that this specific doctor has some pet theory that he's pushing about psychic transference in these situations, and is just trying to like shoehorn his personal like peccadillos into their story.
Yeah. It's sort of a Bud Hopkins situation.
Yeah, exactly.
So wow. Well, I must say though, like watching this and reading a little bit, my interest in the case is pretty reinvigorated. I want to do some more research. You know, I'll let you know what I come back with. But
hey, in a post 400 world, it's all on the table.
No, it's like we are with next week. It's episode 400 of this fucking show, which is crazy. So it's like we might as well reflect on stuff from almost 8 years ago now. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess this comes to the point in our episode where we have to give it the old review, the old rating, which is a scale. It's not exactly a scale. It's more of a vibe. We say the phrase "fuck your documentary," but we have to apply an intonation that does the reviewing. Does that make any fucking sense?
I think it's one of those things that we just have to do and people will get it.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that we can really explain.
Can't describe it.
But yeah. So
but you do have to have a high IQ to really kind of glimpse the truth of our reviews.
Yeah, we only keep our high IQ listeners. This is a fucking like gene purity podcast.
Oh God,
fucking Christ. Eugenics. That's the fucking word I was looking for. Oh man. All right. So let me take a step and think about how I got to do this. I mean, okay. So how do you rate this one? Because like, it's
up and it's down. It's cold and it's hot.
It's entertaining, but not like great.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's not particularly well.
Here, do you want me to try?
Go ahead.
Yeah, fuck your documentary.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of a questioning tone, but like not like what outright, the fuck are you on about, but just like a little bit of a side eye skepticism.
Exactly.
I get it. Okay. So I think I'm gonna go around with fuck your documentary. Just stately, even. It's
middle of the road.
It's so middle of the road.
Yeah.
This is made to be put on in the background while you're doing
it's
shit.
Another one of those, baby.
Yeah, but this is the better version of that compared to some of the other ones that we've watched. This is an actual show.
It's like this is made to be put on in the background, but you're supposed to pay more attention to it than the actual just straight up background noise shows. Like fucking Ancient Aliens, which is trash.
Yeah.
So.
This is what Ancient Aliens tried to wipe from the slate of the earth.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
So
anyways, are you ready to take care of some business, Niall?
Yeah. So if you want to follow the show on social media, which why wouldn't you in this day and age? Social media is the best thing
Everybody
we have.
loves it.
We're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers, from Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. If you listen to podcasts somewhere, look up It Gets Weird, and it's probably there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. If you like video games and talking about weird stuff, Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird is your best bet. You can also email us at itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. If you send us something cool or interesting, maybe a story about your own UFO encounter, we may read it on the show if it doesn't suck too bad, and that's kind of fun. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV, where right now we're discussing season 2 of The X-Files. And as a donor, you get to vote on what show, what season we watch next. So if that sounds appealing, check out the $2 tier. At the $5 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV, plus another bonus show in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Niall, sometimes we watch a movie. We talk about all kinds of stuff on the $5 tier. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to the Discord where we're hanging out, chatting about all kinds of stuff. And yeah, would you believe it? We talk about UFOs in there. In fact, we were recently discussing some stuff about Deborah Cobble and the Egyptian soul box. Some people were kind of throwing out their thoughts on what that may have been, because that was a big mystery after we finished that series of episodes. So if that sounds like a cool conversation, check out our Patreon. We also have a $1 tier where you don't get anything out of it. You're just giving us a tip. You're saying, hey, here's $1. Thanks for doing what you do. If you can't donate, please tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird Podcast. And I will see you, Niall, in episode 400.
Yeah, coming soon to a podcatcher near you.
That's right.
All right. Thank you all for supporting the show and continuing to listen to the podcast. It's been a great 399 episodes. I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.